Hey everybody, today I am going to talk to you about Linux. And should you switch to Linux? Should I? Here is how I made my decision. So Linux is something that I've wanted to get into for a while, but there always was one or two things holding me back. There was always one or two pieces of software, there are one or two things that I needed to depend on, that I was just a little unsure. You know, maybe some people say they have it working, other people say it's bugged. I mentioned in the last video that I replaced the motherboard in my PC so that I could dedicate my laptop to a Linux test, and I am about 3-4 days into my test, and I am reporting back with the results. Drum roll, please. But before we get to that, I guess I'll let you know how I prepped for this, because like I said, this is something that I'd wanted to do for a while, so there were some small steps that I took along the way while I was still in the Windows environment. And those were, if we look down here, you can see these are my most used apps. So OBS, it's on Linux. DaVinci Resolve, it's on Linux. Inkscape, Linux. Carbide Create, actually I'm not really sure. I'll have to check that one out. It could be. GIMP is on there, Blender's on there, VLC's on there, GSender, pretty sure is on there. LibreOffice, definitely on there. Live, Ableton Live, I know that it is not officially supported. So that one is a big thing for me. I'm a musician, I do a lot of musical work, so not having that would be a big blow to me. VS Code, yep, you can get that there. Steam, surprisingly enough, yeah, you can get Steam on Linux, and apparently it works pretty well. And that also played into, my distro choice. And then we've got, Firefox and Chrome. So yeah, I basically for a while now, I have been transitioning my workflow to free and open source software wherever possible. So DaVinci Resolve replaced Premiere Pro in my workflow. And honestly, I paid money for Premiere Pro, and DaVinci Resolve on the same computer just outperformed it, a million times better. Ease of use and cost? Dang, yeah, that beats Premiere Pro hands down. So there are other options too. I'm not super dedicated, I'm not super hooked on Resolve, but yeah, it is available on Linux. So, that made me go, okay, well, that'll make that possible anyway. Inkscape, like we said, they're on there. Carbide Create, this is one of the things that I'm hoping I can maybe get out of Blender, or possibly Inkscape, or possibly some of the other programs that I use. And maybe it's just available on Linux. I have the free version anyway. Yeah, GIMP, we're good. So this was, I guess, my replacement for Photoshop. Maybe it is for a lot of people. I was never a Photoshop power user, so, if you are out there and you just cringed at that, that was just never part of my skill set. I can get by in Photoshop, but GIMP can do everything that I used to do in Photoshop for me. There's also online options like Photopea, so I'm not hugely worried about an image editor. Blender is actually part of the reason why I'm thinking about making the switch, because I've heard that it performs better, and it seems like a lot of the community are Linux users already. It makes sense. It's, free open source application, so why not go with a free open source operating system? Boom VLC, Boom GSender, this is another one of my CNC softwares. I'm pretty sure it is available on Linux, so I'm not concerned about this. LibreOffice, again, this was my replacement for, Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word. I'm sure it is for a lot of people. Again, I'm not a power user of Word or Excel, so there's nothing that I can't do in LibreOffice. I used a handful of other Office suites that were sort of varying degrees of free and paid, and I just found that LibreOffice was the one that worked best for me, or the one that I liked best. Here is the thorny one. This is the one that I think is going to give me the most issue. Ableton Live is not supported, but any Linux user knows that there is this software layer, or emulation layer, whatever you want to call it, called Wine, that will help run Windows programs on Linux. So I have some concerns about doing that, because one of the big advantages of Live is having a low latency setup so that you can basically record and perform music in real time, which if there's any kind of delay, any kind of latency, can really mess you up. That's going to be a big issue for me. And I know that I can get Bitwig. I know that there are other DAWs available for Linux, but Ableton is, I don't know, I love it. I can go into depth about how many companies I hate that have, given me a raw deal over the years. And again, that's another reason why I'm switching to Linux. But Ableton has always been really good to me. I've asked to activate extra computers when my licenses have run out. I've asked to use, expired discount coupons, and they've always been like, yeah, man, we'll take your money. Sure, here, take our stuff. Which, coming from the avid Digidesign Pro Tools world, was just such a breath of fresh air that I have never fallen out of love with this company, which is a weird thing to do. And then we've got Microsoft VS Code. Speaking of, companies that you want to leave behind. So yeah, this one is available on Linux. I think that's enough about kind of my regular workflow. These are the apps that I use most often. There's only one or two that might give me an issue. Most of the way, I'm pretty set. So like I said, that was not an overnight thing. I didn't just one day start using all of these. I had other, sometimes paid, sometimes built-in solutions. I did spend a decade or more as a Mac user because of that audio music real-time connection. And I have also dabbled a little bit. So over the years, I have attempted a couple of goes at Linux. So I used Ubuntu, and typically I'm using them on older hardware. So again, this is not the best indication. But the issue that I had when I was installing Ubuntu was it didn't recognize my Wi-Fi drivers, or it didn't come with Wi-Fi drivers for my device. So, I got it installed, and then I turned off the computer and unplugged it and picked it up and carried it around the house until I could find a spot where I could plug it into Ethernet. And then, I could do my updates and stuff, and I could download the drivers. And it was a bit of a, I had to look up a tutorial for how to find the Wi-Fi drivers in my computer. Older computer, I don't know if that's everybody's. It was an older iMac, I should say. I don't know if that's everybody's experience, but that was my experience with Ubuntu. Once it was up and running, it was nice. I don't really have, any beefs. But yeah, that it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth that it didn't recognize the Wi-Fi drivers, or it didn't come with Wi-Fi drivers. I also tried, and this one might have been AV Linux. I don't really want to throw too much shade at them if I'm wrong. I tried another distro where on the install screen, I'm navigating, choosing my install instructions with the keyboard, and then I install the OS, and then as soon as the OS installs, it doesn't recognize my keyboard anymore. I can't type anything, and I'm going, wow, what is going on? And it turns out, whatever that distro was, it only came with PS2 mouse and keyboard drivers. It didn't have anything that was capable of recognizing the USB, although somehow the installer was able to recognize. So that, again, another little bad taste in my mouth about Linux. It's very possible that I'm doing something wrong, but that's also kind of when I'm installing Windows, when I'm installing Mac OS, that's kind of why I have those install screens that go, next, do you want this? And are you sure? Just because I'm not always super knowledgeable about the inner workings of, the operating system. So that, did me for a while. Like I mentioned, I was a Mac user for 10, 15 years, and coming to PCs after that was a hard transition. I've been on a PC now for so many years that I'm kind of forgetting a bit of the Mac workflow. But yeah, making that switch at first was bizarre. Because I came up with the first computer I ever used was a Commodore 64, to give you an idea of how old I am. And then I got used to the DOS, whatever. I got used to Windows 3.1, 95, XP, and that is when I switched into the Mac ecosystem. And that was, again, for the audio work, for the real-time audio. And from, I think it was 10.3 to about 10.12, I rocked my Mac. Then they stopped supporting it. I downloaded a custom firmware that extended, another couple of years worth of life out of it. And then at that point, none of the apps that I was using for work, Pro Tools, were supported. And I had to upgrade the OS, which meant I had to upgrade Pro Tools, which meant like a $2,000, $3,000 a year subscription which was just nutty to me. And that was when I kind of said, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'm good with Pro Tools. I don't need to use that anymore. And that was when I switched over to do most of my work in Ableton Live. I do a bunch of work in Reaper and a handful of other DAWs. But yeah, then it was kind of time to leave the Mac ecosystem because I couldn't afford the Mac tax at the time to get the the luxury hardware. So I switched over to Windows and I started doing all these things to get I got a dock happening. I think it was called Nexus on Windows. There were a lot of things that I did just to kind of get that Mac-like experience back, which, some of you are cringing, whatever. So I heard about this Linux distro called Elementary. And again, I'm trying it on the older computer. And again, it's an older Mac, so I'm kind of hoping for the best there. But my experience with Elementary was not a great one. And it was something that I shared with the Ubuntu experience. And actually, this was just my general Linux experience across all the distros I tried. You would install it, you would get this graphical package manager or quote unquote app store, and you would click install on an app and it would fail. And you would open, look up a tutorial and they'd say, oh, you can do this via command line. And so I would put it in the command line and it would work instantly, every single time. And that was across multiple distros. And it just left me with this feeling of do these people know what they're doing? I don't know anything about Linux, but why is it that clicking this button fails to download an app and then entering a command in the terminal succeeds? Why can't the button just enter that command in the term, so that was it left again another little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. But anyway, it was really old hardware, so I'm not throwing anything at them. I also heard then Mint was a good one to use if you had an older machine. I think it was Mint. I didn't use that one for very long, and then I thought I would take a shot on one that most people, it seemed, were telling me to stay away from. And that was Manjaro. And Manjaro was my first experience of Linux that just worked. From what I read, this is not the case for most people, I guess. It recognized my keyboard, it recognized my mouse, it recognized the Wi-Fi drivers in the machine, or it, contained, came pre-packed, whatever. And yeah, I just had a computing experience. I installed the operating system and then I used the operating system. And so I was pretty impressed with that relative to my other experiences. And I also found, as I was getting deeper into the Linux community, I think I must be a bit of an atypical Linux user because, I spent a lot of time on Mac OS, and there were a lot of things that I really liked about Mac. So coming from somebody who was on, Windows everything, up until a certain point, coming from someone who's, kind of gone through a lot of the growing pains of getting tech to work together. When I switched from Windows to Mac, there were a handful of things that just kind of stuck with me. Everything I plugged into my Mac worked. Everything. I plugged in a printer, I plug in a scanner, I plug in a keyboard. It doesn't matter. It just works. Maybe it doesn't work through, the company's proprietary whatever solution, but there's probably some internal Mac utility that you can use to just get all the data from that device anyway. And just having dealt with drivers and driver disks and driver CDs and, oh no, patch that driver and then you can, and blah, blah, blah. Everything with Windows was a headache. Getting any device to work. I think this has changed a lot since those days, but when I first went to Mac, I was just like, holy cow. Things just work. This is fantastic. The audio API. I don't want to gush. CoreAudio is the best audio API in the world, period. None are even close. Maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself when we get into Linux, but there are some in Linux that are, looking pretty good. ASIO is, you need, basically, if you want to work on Windows in audio, you need to buy a device, a sound card or USB interface, something that comes with its own ASIO drivers. If you buy a class-compliant device that will let you just, use generic audio streams, whatever, you're gonna have a bad time. MME DirectX is absolute shit. WASAPI is absolute shit. ASIO is only good if the manufacturer has written a good ASIO driver, a good low latency ASIO driver. So like it's possible to do sound on Windows, but it is not possible to do it natively. Like the delay is insane. Like for anyone who doesn't know, CoreAudio, you open up any sort of sound recording application, and let's say you just wanted to use your headphones and the mic that's on your, laptop. I know it's not going to sound good, but like, let's say you just need to open a session, you need to do something quick. You go into your preferences and you can set your buffer size to 32 samples, which is some, tiny, tiny fraction. Like it's probably 1 millisecond or something, or 2 milliseconds. If you try to do the same thing on Windows without having an external sound card, you have to set your input buffer, and then you have to set your output buffer. And if your input and output buffer are below like thousands of samples, then you're gonna get this awful crackling, like these buffer underrun errors. Yeah, so coming from Mac back to Windows, that was a big shock. That was like, holy shit. So yeah, I also got to really like having a dock. The Finder, the file browser that comes with Mac, has this feature where you can open things up in columns, where you can see, the folder, and then if it contains a folder, you can click on that folder, and then that'll open next to that with all the contents of that folder, and so on and so on. I didn't realize how much I would miss that when I moved back to Windows. And another, speaking of things that I didn't realize I would miss when I came back to Windows, was Time Machine. For anyone who has not used Time Machine, it is just the easiest backup tool. Like basically you just say, use this drive. And then from then on, any file you want to get from anytime you need to revert your computer to a specific day, you just click a button and click go there, and you're done. I know Windows has backup utilities, but yeah, it is just not that same like nice, easy experience. The things that I liked about Windows when I came back are the massive hardware and software support. So I know I said you have to download drivers, it's sometimes a bit of a pain in the butt, but there are still pieces of hardware that will only interact with a PC. There just is no way to, deal with them on a Mac. Same with software, particularly free software or like more indie software. It's way more widely available on a Windows PC than it is on a Mac. So those are the things that I'm kind of, missing from each of those experiences, or those are the things that I think I'm going to miss if I move to Linux, or concerned that I'm going to miss. There's also some things that I've just kind of gotten used to from computers in general. Like I need something to be pretty quick, snappy, and responsive to all of my basic needs. Alt-Tab to switch between windows is really nice. And yeah, going from Mac to Windows, part of the shock was, like, they're still using Windows 95 systems in here. I get code-wise, that's phenomenal for, maintaining compatibility, but like, I guess I don't understand why they can't enforce a consistent visual style across those things, even if they are a legacy component, why they can't, blend with the modern UI. Obviously, there is a reason because it's happening, but it just seems so like hacked together. Like if you looked at a Linux distro and you looked at Windows 10 and you had to guess which one was assembled by different random people who, maybe aren't professional software engineers, you would probably pick Windows because it looks like a bit of a dog's breakfast. So yeah, I like to have, that, like, I like it to look nice. And I like to, from the Mac days, like I said, it seemed like there was always a built-in solution that would be able to get your thing done. So, maybe you'll do a better job by buying the app, by buying the official thing, by downloading the whatever. But chances are you can open up image capture or preview one of those other things and sort of get around to get all the data you need. So when I got to Windows, there were a bunch of things that I was like, oh, really? You can't just do that? Like, I have to go and download an app? And like, oh, there aren't really free apps. It's tons of paid apps. And okay, yeah, it seems like a pretty basic function. So I don't really want to have to go through that. Those are my big thoughts and my big concerns. And I guess the last kind of big thing would be I typically use more than one monitor. And, if I want to go somewhere, I'll just unplug the the laptop and I'll pick it up and I'll walk away, and maybe I want to go back and plug it back in again. I have a bunch of devices plugged into a USB hub, so I'm a little concerned about how it's going to handle the hub. See, I'm not really sure, what is the state of hot swapping on Linux. Again, I know back in the day this used to be like a bit of a deal breaker. So these are all the things that I'm concerned about. These are all the reasons why I decided, I'm going to give it a go on my laptop first, and then we'll see how that goes. And it went like this. And here we are in Linux. So I mentioned before that I'd been through a handful of distros. My best experience, personally speaking, was Manjaro. That I also felt would maybe help me around that software support issue. So I had read that Manjaro is an Arch-based distro, and that Arch has access to both the Arch user repository as well as a couple of other user repositories. Yeah, it has access also to a broad range of software that's also available to other distros. So it seemed like that would be maybe my best shot at having that broad range of software support, which I understand would probably be still a little limited. And that was when I started hearing about this newer distro called Garuda. I checked it out, and visually it wasn't, it's a little bright, a little dragony maybe for my tastes. But I started reading through the features. It's got pretty cool backup tool that's more or less automatic. It's got this nice visual style that, once you kind of tweak it to your own personal needs. And yeah, I just found that it seemed like I got the best of all possible worlds. And I did a few virtual machine runs on it, and it was chugging a little bit on the virtual machine, so I was a little concerned about, maybe it would be, even though this is newer hardware, maybe it would be a little more demanding, but I can safely say that it runs much better than Windows 10. Much faster, smoother. Yeah, I've only been in for a few days so far, but I am very happy with the performance. And if we go down, I've got like my little dock back, and so yeah, if you install Garuda Linux, you're not going to see this at first. I installed some custom wallpapers, some custom icons, and click on Files, and I now have my tabbed browser back. Let me find something that has a bunch of folders in it. So yeah, you can kind of see how this, you can still see the full, for anyone who doesn't know Mac. And so this is the Pantheon file browser from, or called Pantheon Files, from the Elementary OS. And so I just liked that, so I just plunked it in here. And yeah, I like it. It's been a great experience. All the stuff that I wanted to get, I downloaded, I installed. I haven't installed any Steam games yet, but believe it or not, I got Ableton Live installed and running within about 5 minutes. Now, there's a huge catch that comes with that. I have not figured out how to lower the latency. So I'll make a separate video about, how I got this up and running, and I have installed a low latency driver. I've got it to recognize, I think it's called Wine ASIO, but it's still not, it's still not quite there. And I know that it's not quite there because I also installed Bitwig Studio. And now I don't own Bitwig, so it's a paid program, and I am a little reluctant to buy more since I, have actually invested in the software here. But I can tell from having used this that the computer is capable of doing low latency operation, that I will get better performance out of Bitwig than I will out of Ableton. So there probably is some tweaking to be done. But really everything aside from Ableton Live has worked just immediately and faster than it did on Windows. Yeah, it has been somewhere between a pleasure and a joy so far, honestly, working with this operating system. If you don't have one of those proprietary programs that you really need or want to work with, then I really can't recommend Garuda Linux enough. It comes with, when you first open it, a Garuda Assistant lets you perform system updates. Lets you just click to install anything you need, and it works. When you click install, it actually installs. There's definitely going to be some stuff to get used to. I don't know the file system. I'm still working on what things are called, working with the command line more. There is going to be a learning curve, but I have to say, relative to all the other distros I've tried, this is by far the best out-of-the-box experience. You know, most Linux users, apparently, they're complaining about bloat. They want this command line and nothing else, no other package that they didn't expressly install. You know, that's not me. I want an operating system. I want Windows without paying Microsoft money. You know, I want Mac OS without supporting Apple. And this is really doing it for me. So I will keep you updated, and I'll let you know, once it's more than just a few days into the test. But definitely, for the first few days running Linux on bare metal, I am so happy. Yeah, I'm feeling the joy of working on a computer. And yeah, I don't want to gush, but I am really impressed. I'm really happy. Hotswapping works pretty great. Any issues that I had were resolved by just unplugging the HDMI cable from my monitor and plugging it back in again. Same with actually, I didn't even have any issues with the USB hub. Yeah, I have a mouse, a keyboard, I have a digital mixer, so like a USB audio interface. And yeah, just hot swap it in, pop it in, and it recognizes it immediately. Unplug it, plug it into the Windows machine, it's back on the Windows machine. Unplug it back into the Linux machine, and I don't know what I was expecting, but hot swapping is smooth sailing. So yeah, should I switch to Linux? Gee, I'd like to. There's only a couple of things that are really kind of holding me back right now, so I'm not ready to, totally format the drives on the PC and give up the Windows experience yet, but I am, to go from someone who is thinking about testing Linux to a few days later thinking about formatting their Windows PC to then be another Linux machine. Yeah, it's a pretty good experience. So yeah, I'm not rushing into anything yet. I'm going to give it a few more days, weeks, months, whatever, to see how this runs in the long term. But overall, again, experience may vary, but Garuda Linux just works, and that is a big deal for someone who's new to the Linux ecosystem. You install it and it works. You click update system and it updates your system. You click install this application and it installs this application. Hats off to the people who made it. I am really seriously contemplating maybe not going back to Windows. A lot of food for thought. Should I switch to Linux? Should you? Time will tell. This is how I got to where I am today.